We are the DSA International Committee, one of the national level working groups for the Democratic Socialists of America. And we organize around international affairs, foreign policy, migration, opposing war, these types of things from an anti-colonial and anti-imperialist perspective for DSA. And Luna is the preeminent English language Vietnamese socialist YouTuber. Luna provides an invaluable political and social and historical commentary and analysis to help us all learn and become better organizers for the tasks in front of us today. Luna has also just translated the official Vietnamese curriculum on dialectical materialism into English. I highly recommend people check that out. But today is Vietnam War Veterans Remembrance Day. Every year, the Vietnam War Veterans Remembrance Day commemorations always exclude any Vietnamese perspective. Let me pass this over to our guide for tonight, Luna. Please take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Luna. I am a Vietnamese and a socialist born and living in Vietnam. The movie that you're going to watch today is a movie about the girl of Hanoi. And the movie was shot in 1973, just 6 months after the actual bombing campaign of the USA, the campaign linebacker. So all the footage, all the broken houses and war and street and all the bombs, they were all real because it's just 6 months after the actual bombing, and all the people working on the street and crying on the street, that is real. And even the story of the girl of Hanoi is a combination of two true stories that happened right at that time in Hanoi, 1972. So this is gonna be the movie made by Vietnamese about the Vietnam War from the actual Vietnamese perspective. And it's not just a movie, it is a documentary because there's no movie set, everything is real.
Wow.
Yeah, this movie is definitely very emotional.
What's your immediate reaction to the film? And maybe if you could say, why is this movie a valuable one for Americans to see on Vietnam War Veterans Day?
I felt like I was watching the life of my mother, my own mother, because that girl's age was about my mother's age. And she was being bombed by the US when she was 10 in my hometown, Thanh Hóa. We talk about the Vietnam War, people just think about the US perspective. This movie shows you perspective from real Vietnamese boys, not just soldiers, not just grown-up who knew why they were in this and what were they fighting for. This movie shows the life of children, the life of innocent people who are affected by this war. Like the girl in the movie, she didn't understand why the USA, kept bombing the schools where my younger sister was studying. Why did it happen? That is the question that millions of Vietnamese have been asking. Why? Why did they do this? Millions of us were killed by those bombs and napalms and Agent Orange and bullets.
Tại sao chú lại đem bom đến đây ném? Hả chú? Tại sao chúng lại thích giết trẻ em? Lại cứ đem bom ném xuống trường học? Như lớp mẫu giáo của em cháu. Em cháu có làm gì chúng nó đâu.
This is the narrative that you've been missing in the West. The narrative of innocent people, innocent children, innocent kids, heavily affected by this American war.
Absolutely, Luna. And judging from the comments in the chat, I think this film did achieve that. So what should you as citizens be thinking about on Vietnam Veterans Day?
There are millions of people, and each person has their own story. People from the USA, both from Vietnam. I mean, my own family history is very complicated. I have one grandpa who fought and died in the Vietnam War in 1968 during the Tet Offensive. On the other side of my grandpa, he had fought in the Dien Bien Phu victory in 1954 against the colonialist France. He walked and brought rice to the soldiers who actually fought the wars. He was a hero of mine for helping in that recent war, but he was also a feudal landlord that owned the whole town, and he worked for the feudal system. He was very, very, very rich before the land reforms in 1954. I see that like happen very commonly in the USA, is that your people tend to simplify and essentialize things a lot. But you have to understand this. I could not essentialize my own grandpa as like either he was a hero of mine who had fought the war, or he was an evil landlord. And the truth is that he was both. You might have an uncle or grandpa or even your own father fought in this war. And You know what? That is not a reason why you should support the empire or the military or the war. I cannot tell you what to think about your own grandpa, your own uncle, or your own father who fought in the war. I can show you the real Vietnamese perspective from the Vietnamese people who suffer from this war and how we should all oppose American imperialism and their genocidal wars all over the world. Vietnamese people, we are forgiving people, but we will not forget. And here's the thing, many Vietnam veterans regret that they joined the war, but there are still some who worship, US imperialism and support the war and said that this is a good thing. And I want them to know that they are wrong. And we need to confront these people. We need to show you the truth. And I saw many people who were like, oh, my uncle fought in the Vietnam War, so I don't know, I'm not sure. No, you must be sure, because you must know the truth of this war. You must know about the atrocities that the USA commit. And the fact that your uncle fought in that doesn't mean that you have to support it. It means that you have to be critical. You have to confront. If you confront, it doesn't mean you don't love them. You have to have very nuanced and have comprehensive and historical viewpoint about this problem.
Can you speak to how is it that people in Vietnam contend with the history of US imperialism in the Asia Pacific and its current remilitarization of the region through the new Cold War that the US is carrying out?
We teach our own people real history. We taught our people about the thousands of years of resistant wars against all kinds of enemies and why we remain independent today and why we should protect our independence and freedom. And to be real honest with you, Vietnamese people, generally speaking, looking at the militarization of the USA and what it has been doing the whole world, bombing, drone strikes, killing people all over the world, we are scared. We are scared because we are just a small country and they've been forcing us to take a side. Like, we can't do that. We will not take a side. We will stay neutral and we will remain our independence and freedom. We hope that the US empire will someday stop being an empire. And we hope that someday Vietnam and many other countries like Cuba, Laos, Venezuela, and China will somehow get rid of that civil power and can flourish on our own. But at the same time, we prepare for the worst can happen. We are strengthening our agriculture, means that we will try to feed our own people whenever the worst happen, any sanction or anything, feed our own people. And also we are trying to get rid of the domination of US dollars in our economy, which is very hard. We are trading with other countries using our own currency instead of US dollars. That is one of the few things that we are doing. We're also preparing our own weapon system so we can defend ourselves like that. But generally speaking, yes, we hope for the best and we prepare for the worst. And we will try our best to remain peace in the world like that. It's scary, scary future.
In the film, there's a brief mention that a trade union had donated a jacket to the girl at the start of the film. Are you able to speak more to what was the function of trade unions or labor-related organizing during the war?
I had a whole video about it, talking about the labor law in Vietnam, and I can answer you directly that the union movement is essential for the resistance wars of Vietnam against both France and the USA. In Vietnam, the first union ever was called the Red Union. It was formed around 1927 to 1929. It was in a factory owned by France in the south of Vietnam, the Ba Son factory. They became the core part of the Communist Party of Vietnam and then the whole Liberation Army of Vietnam. The unions were the place where people got radicalized. They understand the nature of capitalism, which was exploitation of the capitalists. They learned racism coming from the French owners. And from that, they got exposed to communism and socialism and why we need to join together to fight this war. And we can only win if we unite together. Union was the core stepping stone you must have. So it is important. To this day, the unions in Vietnam is very, very powerful. Our Federation of Labor Union in Vietnam has 11 million members. 11 million members. Meanwhile, the Communist Party of Vietnam only has 5.2 million. So the Workers' Union in Vietnam has double the members of the Communist Party of Vietnam. And one of the important roles in our political system means that they have political power. They are in the government. They work with the government and the National Congress and the Communist Party of Vietnam. By now, about 90% of Vietnamese workers are unionized. Our goal is that maybe by 2030 or something like that, 100% of our workers will be unionized. And it is written in the law in Vietnam that in any company that has more than 5 workers want to form a union, there must be a union. And that union must be independent from the company and they have a direct help from the local government. They equal.
Trong túi có một cái áo dép và 2 bộ quần áo của công đoàn cơ quan mua cho cháu. Còn gói bít cốt là của bác Bình hàng xóm cho.
The system of workers' union in Vietnam is more like syndicalism. It means that we have a grassroots union, and then we have the local like district union, and then we have provincial union, have a national union. At the same time, we have a trade union that have about 20 trade unions that cover 20 sectors of our industry. It means that one worker can be in multiple unions. One worker can be in this grassroots union, can also join their own district union, can also join that sector of industry that they work for. Multiple like that. And they vote for their leaders and they vote for their National Union Congress. So it's pretty amazing and pretty powerful.
Wow. Trying to imagine what that system could possibly look like in the US. I know our society will look real different if anything close to that. Can you say a little bit more about the terms of the treaty that ended the war and specifically the debt payments that were made between Vietnam and the United States after it?
Yeah, not many people know about that. The US propaganda system, again, the mainstream media or your education system try to hide the truth. So the movie talk about the bombing rates in Hanoi in December 1972. And because the US lost in this bombing rates, they had to serious and sign the Paris Agreement in January 1973. And after that, they had to agree to start withdrawing US troops out of Vietnam. From 1973 to 1975, they slowly withdrawing the US troops. According to the Paris Agreement, the US troops could not fight directly, so they aided the puppet regime. They used Vietnamese people to fight against Vietnamese people. The puppet regime was so bad at fighting that it took us just 2 more years to completely defeat them in 1975. But this is how the story started. The puppet regime lost, and we took over the government, and the North and South of Vietnam united. The US was very sour about this, and they couldn't accept the fact that they lost to this country on the other side of the earth. They forced the newly born Vietnamese government to pay back the debt of the puppet regime that they funded themselves. They forced the North government of Vietnam to pay back that debt. And it was $145 million. It is big money now, but it was huge, massive at that. Vietnam was bombed back to the Stone Age. You saw the real footage of our city. This is the capital city of Vietnam. Imagine Washington, D.C., your capital city would bomb back to the Stone Age like that. We were desperate. We had nothing. Our people were starving to death. And then we had to pay $145 million back to the country that did that to us. The amount of irony in this story. But we could not refuse this because the US, they had the money and they had the weapons and they had the soft power to take control of the United Nations. And if we did not agree to pay that debt back, we would be sanctioned heavily by the USA, even though the USA still sanctioned us all the way until 2006. So here's the thing. They asked us to pay back the debt from 1975. We kind of ignored it. We was busy rebuilding our country. But then around 1994, when Vietnam was under heavy, comprehensive US sanctions, we were desperate. The US went back again and they asked us, hey, if you pay this debt back, we will think about not sanctioning you anymore. So we had to agree to pay that back officially around 1994. And it took us until 2019, which was just 3-4 years ago, to pay all of that debt back. While we were still paying the ridiculous debt back to the USA, on the other hand, used their media to make up some posts saying like, oh, Vietnamese people love America right now. Vietnam and America have a great relationship. Right now, Vietnam actually love capitalism. On the other hand, they forced us to pay that debt back. You know the irony here? Yes, we pay that. And yeah, it is like how the USA just control the narrative in the media all the way through.
Thank you for that context, Luna. That's really shocking and disgusting stuff. How did Vietnam rebuild after the war, between then up until now?
I could write a whole essay about it. After the war in 1975, Vietnam spent 10 years trying to do the subsidizing model following Stalin and the USSR. At that time, what we did was that we are trying to eliminate currency and monetary system. We use food stamps instead of money. As you saw in the movie, the girl used some kind of a book to go and get her rice, right? That is a system that we use. So like when you volunteer to work on a farm, your own farm, or the families, or the village farm, or the factory, or something like that, then the factory and the local government will work together and assign you some kind of food stamps, not really food stamps, but you can understand, you get the point, right? So like people would keep that book, like the rice book, and then the meat book, and then the other household stuff book. And they brought that book every month whenever needed to the government stores and grab those back for their living. My mom lived like that for 10 years. We did that from 1975 to 1985, and we failed. I'm sorry, but we failed. We were too dogmatist about it. We were not practical. We didn't have nothing. And at the same time, we were sanctioned. At the time, there were mostly two countries that have Vietnam. It was Cuba and it was Laos. Cuba was a country that donated vaccines and medicines to Vietnam. And Laos was the one who secretly traded with us so we can get more food and MSG and cooking oil and clothes. The USSR and the China split, the Sino-Soviet split. So we could not ask for any help from both of them. It was a very, very tough time for Vietnam. Domestically, our people were starving to death. Talking about the foreign affairs, we were sanctioned. And even our two friends, Laos and Cuba. Cuba has been under US sanction even to this day. And Laos is the most bombed country on us. We were devastated. That was why we decided to have a Doi reforms. It means that we had to open our country, our economy, so we can borrow money from the IMF and the World Bank. He can borrow money. We could not ask money for free. No, we can borrow money from the IMF and the World Bank so we can rebuild our country. We had to do that so we can persuade the USA to stop sanctioning us. We had to expose our country to US imperialism so we can have money to feed our own people. That is a very tough choice that Vietnam had to make. And lots of people especially people from USA, they don't understand this. They thought that Vietnam abandoned and betrayed communism and socialism for opening that. They don't understand why we had to do that. We were facing the consequence of millions of us starving to death. My mom could starve to death in the 1980s if Vietnam didn't open our economy. And we understand that we would expose our country to US imperialism, but we had to do in order to save millions of people. This is a tough decision for anybody, because like running a whole country is not easy, especially running a country that dare to follow socialism, while the USA still remain as an empire, control the whole world. And to this day, Vietnam called our economy socialist-oriented market economy. Both socialism and capitalism exist in our own country, and I also have a whole video explaining about it. It's Vietnam Socialist on my channel, so you can go and check it out. But what I'm telling you right now is that Vietnam now is one of the fastest growing economy in Asia. It means that we are doing something right. We are facing a lot of problems. I'm not saying we are perfect. No, we are a long way. We just a baby step ahead on building socialism in our country. It is very tough. And what I'm been telling you is this. I don't want you to just follow exactly our steps, because every different country has their own material conditions, whole different story in different society. The reason why I'm here and having my channel is that I show you what we did and what we are doing, so you can look at us and learn lessons from it. Yes, we made mistakes. We also had some achievement. Look at us, learn from us, and build your own movement. The DSA is one of the biggest party of socialist people in the USA. I hope that you can educate your own people, can lead your own people, can have a movement to have your own people. Look at countries like Vietnam, look at what we did right and what we did wrong at the same time. Learn from it, be knowing this. You will make mistakes. But as Ho Chi Minh said, we are not afraid of making mistakes. The thing that we should be afraid of is that we making mistakes, but we do not fix it. That is the thing that we should be scared of. So you go do it. You have to learn theory. By the way, talking about theory, this is the book that I just translated. Please go read. This is the theory part. Vietnam, this is theory coming from the country that actually won the wars against France and the USA. Learn from this. This is a theory. And then apply that theory into real life. Learn what works and what don't work. And then apply that what work into your movement. I really hope, because you are the one who live right in the belly of the beast. You have to fight the fight. We already won our fight and we are building it, but because the USA still exists, the empire still exists, we're still being oppressed by it, and you are here. You are our biggest hope. And I really hope that the DSA can have a strong movement.
Hanoi, Hải Phòng và một số thành phố xí nghiệp có thể bị tàn phá. Song nhân dân Việt Nam quyết không sợ. Không có gì quý hơn độc lập tự do. Đến ngày thắng lợi, nhân dân ta sẽ xây dựng lại đất nước ta đàng hoàng hơn, to đẹp hơn.
And what you do, what you build, the movement that you build will not only just beneficial to your own people, it is beneficial to the rest of the world, especially to Vietnamese people.
Thank you so much, Luna. As a professional United States human rights observer, that's what it says on your Twitter bio, so I assume that's your job.
I have a certificate for it, yeah.
Okay, great. What do you think it will take to wake up Americans to the reality of the role their country is playing in the world?
What will it take you? Read this book. That's what it takes.
That's
Education
right.
is the key. Education is the key. You can just buy this book from banyanhouse.org or lunaoi.com/shop. This is it. You learn theory. You need to learn theory. But not just that, because if you do that, you're just being a dogmatist. You need to apply theory into practice.
Don't forget the ebook's going to be free.
Yeah, and the ebook is going to be free. Thank you, EJ, my comrade. The ebook is going to be free. So don't worry if you cannot afford that. Totally fine. Go to banyanhouse.org. That is, just follow my Twitter. Learn theory. And then learn history. Learn the True history. Do not learn the whitewash version. I'm sorry, a bunch of historians. I just don't want to name any names. But anyway, learn the true history from actual perspective of the victims of the US empire. Learn the truth, learn theory, and then apply that into real life. Go organize. You organize. You have to go out there to start the change. Reading is just the first step. The second and more important step is you have to go out there and make the change. That is the most important. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a game plan. Sounds like we got some things to do after this call event.
Don't stop, we're dropping like a rock. We gotta organize, cause they're ruling from the top. Yeah, flat it out, dish it out, stretch it strong, make it long, creating bonds. We'll hit the system with a million songs. Don't stop, raise our voices, pull the stops. Be uncertain, make mistakes, build up power on the block. And realize and matronize, organize, politicize, abolish all the structures that keep bringing us out to dry. Cause they don't stop, don't we say enough's enough? Don't we see it, don't we know it, don't we smell it? Think on what we gotta catalyze our spaces, empower from below, self-determined, share our burdens, fight cross-border for the people. That's right, don't stop. There's meaning in the struggle, there's values based in mutual care and peace, diversity, resistance, liberation from conditions that derail our coexistence. Feared, I know, alien, alone, drifting back to self-reproach. Here I feel my failure's all that's real, while I atone in the self-destructing fantasy of a home.